Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I have been a little under the weather this week, but I think some of you have been too, so we've just been sharing our grief. Next week I'll be in Austin, just to let everybody know what Virginia and I will be. I'm going to take her with me. And it's always a pleasure to have somebody talk to you when you're traveling, you know. And got to take my wife. All right, just to let you know, just update on the songbooks. I think we settled on 300 of them. And if you want to look at the new ones, we have a copy of it back here in the back that y'all can take a look at. And it's very well done. We got a really good price for them, and I think everybody's going to be real happy. I think there's like a total of 163 songs in this book. So we've got quite a few new additions. And hopefully we'll have those within a couple of weeks. But I gave Billy asked for the task, and I turned it over to him. I said, well, these have got to be done by first day of unleavened bread. So he came through, and I appreciate it. Also, we're going to have the songs on the website so that anybody can play them anywhere. Like Houston, they always play their songs off the laptop down there. They don't have discs, and they play them off other people's website. They use our book, but they find the songs on different websites. So all of ours that are in the book are going to be in the website. All right, just a quick mention here. Nick brought it up about the inauguration yesterday of Donald Trump, and just to reiterate, we have he's our new leader of our nation, good or bad. He's our president of the United States. And just say this one thing before I move on. I was impressed with him about in his address about calling upon God to help lead him in things that God kept coming up all through the presentations and things, and I was happy to hear that. Not so much with all the other, well, I'll leave that alone. But I'm fixing to get in trouble. Anyway, but I was impressed about him calling upon God. And I know that was hard for many to hear in our country, but we need God in our lives. And we should pray, like Nick said, for his protection, our protection, and our country's protection. And we should call upon our Creator to do that. And hope that's a pattern and not just a one-time thing. All right, before I get into my sermon, I want to make a short disclaimer. I'm not a scientist of any kind, of any type. I have no training in astronomy, chemistry, geology, or biology, or of any sort. I do have an associate's degree in computer science, let me put it that way, and quite a few certifications in that field as well. I'm not going to go through all those. I have taught computer maintenance at Temple College, junior college over here. I taught for 2 semesters on a part-time basis. And I say this because there are going to be some technical descriptions given that I want to stress that these are coming from researchers and scientists, and those will be the ones that I'm quoting from this book called The Case of Creator by Lee Strobel. And if it comes from my own training, I'll let you know. And there is one section in here that does kind of delve into my training a little bit. So I guess you'd guess that I'm continuing, or I'm going to complete the series that I began a few weeks ago called Fine Tuning. This is the last one, it's part 3. And this part of it will delve into the human environment in the cellular level and the conscious level and the spiritual level. Now, Mr. Strobel, like I said, this book, this sermon, this series was based upon this book that I read from Lee Strobel, Case Creator. Mr. Strobel, as I said in my previous 2 sermons, was a skeptic of religion, and he had turned atheist as a young student in college. After his marriage and a few years down the road and more specialized education, he became a journalist in Chicago for a well-known newspaper, and his wife eventually became a Christian later on in years and began conversing with him about becoming a Christian as well. And they kept having these discussions, and his wife's Christianity eventually inspired him to investigate creation versus evolution. And he wanted to see basically what scientists who had turned Christian had to say about evolution and why they didn't agree with evolution any longer. So he went out and found the leading men in their different fields: geology, biology, astrology, and all the other fields that you can think of, all the other ologies. But since we began this series, we have explored a couple of areas already. One dealing with the earth and the universe, and the other with physics behind all we know. Now, we've seen how God's hand is present in everything, pretty much, that we look at. And there's quite a few unexplainable things when you get into looking at these things. And we've seen that the evidence of fine-tuning in these areas tell us that the world was created, and really, it's hard to reach a conclusion that it evolved somehow, as many claim, who state their beliefs in Darwinism. But if you need more proof, amen, that helps. If you need more proof than what I've already given you in the first two sermons of this series, then what I'll say to you today is there's a whole lot more coming today. So, and if you really want a whole lot more, get the book, because I'm going to tell you, it's very impressive. Today we'll begin exploring, like I said, in microbiology, and we're going to learn some things that you and I were never taught in schools about cells, DNA, proteins, things of that nature, and actually the body's inner world. I remember a long time ago there was a show about these people who got shrunk down when they shot them into the people's system, and they flew around looking at cells and things, and they just showed the cell was a simple thing, just floating around or whatever, but that's not so true. Michael Behe, that's B-E-H-E, is a leading PhD in biochemistry, and this is one of the guys that he interviewed, and he's one of the leading men in this field. And what he did is, when he teaches his classes in students at Lee's University and Research Facility in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, he gets into creationism, and he also was he wrote a book, it was an award-winning book called Darwin's Black Box. Now let me get off on a rabbit trail here for just a second. The concept of the black box is a term scientists use when describing a system or a machine that they find interesting, but they don't know how it works. So they just call it a black box. Example, I can give you a good example, and this is where my expertise comes in. Excuse me. A desktop computer is a black box to many people. Most people can use one, but the workings are simply just a mystery to them. They don't know how it works, they don't know how it functions, they couldn't repair one if their life depended upon it. I was hired in Temple College in the early 2000s as an instructor in computer maintenance. And the reason why I was hired there was it was specifically for software students, people who wrote code. Because whenever you go into computer training and you go into learn how different things about computers, you normally don't get much cross-training. You either learn maintenance or you learn software, or you learn or coding, or you learn like websites or something like that, and you specialize. You get a little bit of cross training, but you don't get much. So what was happening there is they had people who could write code all day long, but couldn't switch out a network card in a computer. and didn't understand how it worked. So that was my job, was to go in there and teach them. It was also my job in Time Warner Cable to do the same thing. When we started high-speed internet, I had to teach all of our technicians how to put network cards in computers and set them up. That was a job that lasted for a while. Yeah. But they couldn't install a simple sound card, network card. They couldn't do anything when they cracked the box. It was just a black box. Now, they could sit there and write code into that box all day long and download programs and download games and play games and different things like that, but they couldn't fix them for the most part. Well, looking back into microbiology now, the human cell is a black box to most humans and scientists alike. They know what it does. They know basically how it acts in the human body and different things like that, but they don't know what's in it. They don't know what its makeup is for the most part. They can even manipulate some of them into doing certain things that they're not supposed to do, but they can do that somewhat, a little bit. And I think that's in some of the areas they're trying to cure certain diseases and things like that, to manipulate DNA and different things, gene therapy and things like that. But for the most part, the human cell is a mystery to them. And scientists, they believe the more that we learn about the cell, the more simpler it would become. They thought in the original days, whenever they could look at a microscope and see a cell, that it was just a basic entity and it had basic function, and that was it. And it was a very simple piece of biology. But like a computer, the more you learn, the more difficult something becomes. You can become more efficient in the ways of typing or using programs or database, and you think you've mastered that computer. But when you crack it open and you try to do something else, it becomes a whole lot more complex. It becomes something different. It becomes a different learning. Essentially, you began your learning process over again into a different section of that same world. Well, the same happened with the cell. The more that they learned, the more complex it had become. And the deeper they looked, the more astounded they became. And this is a quote from Behe. He says, "Now we've probed into the bottom of life, so to speak, and we're at the level of molecules, and there's complexity all the way down. We've learned the cell is horrendously complicated, and it actually run by micro machines of the right shape, the right strength, the right interactions." And so they look at this, and you ever heard of nanotechnology? They're looking at these in that way now, that they act like some people believe. You've seen these science fiction shows where they got these little micro machines that go into people's computers or whatever and do different things and say, I don't know, you might not watch the same programs I do. But anyway, there are some out there that do that. But that's how they're looking at these things now, and I'm going to tell you why. But first, Darwin himself made a comment in his book, The Origin of Species, and it says, "If you could demonstrate that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down." His theory would absolutely break down. If you could not find an organism or something of that nature that did not evolve in slow processes, is what he's saying. He said his theory would break down. Well, Darwin's theory of life slowly evolved over eons of time, and that's what he believed. Beginning with the simplest of life to the most complex today. Beginning with the simple protein or amino acids into proteins, then to cells. The simplest of life actually being the single cell, and that which was once considered was the beginning of life, and the least complex of life, which evolved over time, fitting whatever circumstances it found itself, building upon itself as it went through the changes of time. What that statement means is that it created itself under the circumstances it found itself into what it needed to be. Well, the problem becomes, as Behe explains, the more complex a system or a device is, the more it relies upon the components to make it function properly. All right? To demonstrate that, he uses a simple mousetrap. You can see all the independent parts of a mousetrap when you look at a mousetrap. The old wooden mousetrap had the wooden base with the two-wire hammer, which actually catches a mouse, and third, the spring, which provides a tension for the trap, and fourth is catch. It releases the hammer when the mouse applies the right amount of force upon it. So you got basically 4 components to a mousetrap to make it function properly. If you remove any one of those parts, any one, don't care which one it is, any one, it will not function. It's not a mousetrap anymore. It will no longer work in what it intended to be. Now, the mousetrap couldn't have evolved because you can't have a spring that began as a mousetrap that acted as a mousetrap without the other 3 components. Same with all the other 4 components. It had to be all at once or nothing. Nature presents itself in the same manner, despite what evolutionists want to tell you. You can't have an evolution that gives us a cell, even the most simplest of cells. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in nature. It doesn't happen in laboratories. It doesn't happen anywhere. Now, they can create things. They can make things happen and stuff like that, but they created things. Behe's quote, "Evolution can't produce an irreducibly complex biological machine suddenly all at once because it's too complicated. The odds against that would be prohibitive." Behe continues, "Life is actually based on molecular machines. They haul cargo from one place into a cell to another. They turn cellular switches on and off. They act as pulleys and cables, electrical machines. They let current flow through the nerves. Manufacturing machines to build other machines. Solar-powered machines capture the energy from the light and store it in chemical molecular machines, letting cells move, reproduce, process food, get rid of waste. In fact, every part of the cell's function is controlled by complex, highly calibrated machines." If a simple mousetrap requires the creation of function to function properly, what about fine-tuning the molecular world? What are some of the other complexities found in the molecular world? Well, have you ever heard of them? I hope I say this right. Flagellin. I don't want to say it the way I think it reads because then it sounds like another word. Well, it's a bacteria that performs like a rotary propeller. Now, you're going to love this one, especially you, Ray, because it's right down your field. It's kind of a pill shape when you look at it under the microscope, with a long whip-like appendage made out of protein called flagellin. The whip-like appendage is attached to a drive shaft, allowing it to rotate freely. It has kind of a bushing where the whip-like appendage goes into the pill shape. It has the appearance of a motorboat, kind of. Now, the energy source is what's called carrier molecules, and they supply the power necessary to rotate the whip. The whip on this bacterium rotates at 10,000 RPMs. 10,000 RPMs. Very few engines in our world today rotate at that speed. Until you get into the really high-powered modern vehicles of today and things of that nature, you're not going to find something that rotates like that. And not for a sustainable amount of time. But what's more amazing about this, that's amazing in itself, but what's more amazing about it, it can stop within a quarter of a turn and then reverse itself. No man-made engine could come close to doing something like that. It's just not possible. It's just not possible in our world. Howard Berg of Harvard University called it the most efficient motor in the universe. That's quite an achievement when you consider it's only 1 to the 20,000th power, or of an inch, or 1 to the 20th thousandths of an inch.
It doesn't require any hot fuel.
Mm-hmm. It also has a guidance system, unlike a smart bomb. It knows where to go, when to go, and where to go. It's programmed. It's what the microbiologists call it. It's programmed. Knows where to go, and where to go. When to turn on and when to turn off. All cells really have this ability, though. Cells are so complex that they're made of many types of proteins and molecules. And they all know their function. Now, sometimes those functions get messed up in different things like cancers and things like that. But for a healthy one, they know where to go and what to do. They're programmed. Some travel the equivalent of one of us traveling halfway around the world to do a job. That's how far they travel in our bodies on a consistent basis. They know when to go and where to go, and what to do when they get there. Cells have 20 different compartments dividing components. Some components will work in one compartment but not in another. The right molecules, called ribosomes, comprising of groups of 50 molecules, have different jobs in specific areas of the cell that won't function in the other areas of the cell. It has to load the right materials in the right compartment at the right time and find its way to the right location and deliver what it has at that location, or pick up what it needs. It's as every bit as complex as our highway infrastructure that we travel on every day in our lives. Isn't that amazing? What we thought was just a simple cell. In Leviticus 17:11, if you want to turn there, you can. It's just one short verse that I want to bring up. It says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul." Our ancient fathers knew that life was in the blood. Now, they most likely didn't know the complexities of it, but they knew that if you bled enough, you died. And blood carries water, nourishment to every cell, maintains the body temperature, and removes the waste material of the body's cells. Blood also carries oxygen from the lungs throughout the body, and in 1616, William Harvey discovered that blood circulation is a key factor of physical life. Now, I think they discovered it a long time before that, but he's the one who wrote it down first, I guess. And he confirmed what the Bible had actually revealed 3,000 years prior. But let me ask this: has any one of you have a cut recently? I had one here a couple of weeks ago on this finger. It's healing pretty good, but it's a pretty nasty cut. When I cut myself, if my blood hadn't clotted in the right place, at the right amount, at the right time, I would have bled to death. Scary, isn't it, when you think about it in that way? There is a 10-step function involving about 20 types of molecule components for blood clotting, according to this book and the scientists. So once more, I quote from Behe himself. It says, the real trick with blood clotting isn't so much the clot itself, it's a blob that blocks the flow of blood, but it's the regulation of the system. So he continued, if you make a clot in the wrong place, say the brain or the lung, you'll die. If you make a clot 20 minutes after all the blood is drained from your body, you'll die. If the blood clot isn't confined to the cut, your entire blood system will solidify and you'll die. If you make a clot that doesn't cover the entire length of the cut, you'll die. To create a perfectly balanced blood clotting system, clusters of proteins, components have to be instructed all at once. And that rules out gradualistic Darwinism approach that fits the hypotheses of intelligent design. Of an intelligent design, I should say. Now, evolutionists have tried to come up with a step-by-step scenario to explain how blood clotting could have come into being gradually over time. But they can't. It's all or nothing. Nothing would have lived. The first time it got cut, it would have died. Stop and think about it. There's nothing gradualistic about it. No one has ever done a successful experiment showing how blood clotting could have developed in an evolutionary process. So let's look at DNA. Some call it the language of God. In Scriptures, Hebrews 11:11 says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, but the evidence of things not seen. For by the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which were seen are not made of things which are visible. The things that we see in our universe today are made from atoms and the beings and the trees and things like that. Or not the beings, I should say, are all made of DNA. It is said that the information needed to build the proteins for all the species of organisms that have ever lived is a number estimated to be approximately 1,000 million and could be held in a teaspoon, and there would be enough room left over for all the information in every book ever written. Size of DNA. That's quite a bit. Our 23 chromosomes can yield up to or as many as 20,500 kinds of proteins. It takes proteins to build cells. DNA is the information storehouse for finely tuned manufacturing process, which requires the right amino acids which link together are the right bonds into the right sequence to produce the right kinds of proteins that fold in the right way to build a biological system. DNA, put in an even simpler form, is the programming code within the cells instructing what cells need to do and where to go and when to go. It's just like a computer. I can build a computer. I've built lots of computers. But I've taken maybe 4 classes in programming and I'd hated every one of them. And I couldn't get out of them fast enough. I made an A in almost all of them. Even one of them wanted me to come back and take the second part of this class, and I said, no thanks. I got my A, I'm gone. If you want to make a computer do a different thing, have a different function, you have to input additional code. I can build one, I can put one together, but I can't make the code to make it run. Or programs. I can build a website, almost, barely. Some might say not very good. But it's there. And it takes code to build that website. But if you wanted to do something else, you have to input some other program that's made out of code, or you have to input code into that computer before it will do that. It's the same with DNA. It's the same thing with DNA. So where did the first genetic information come from? Who wrote the code? Well, that's a question for evolutionists, and they're not very good at giving answers when it comes to that field. Where did the first instructions for the first cell come from? I'm going to use an analogy given by the book of Stephen C. Myers, PhD. He says, think of making a soup from a recipe. You can have all the ingredients on hand, but if you don't know the proper preparations or the items to add in what order or how to cook the concoction, you won't get a soup that's worth eating. Believe me, if you ate some of my soup, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, the same with the primordial soup. Even if the right chemicals were available to create a living cell, the information would have to be there to arrange them in specific configurations in order to perform biological functions. The issue is, there was no coding available in the beginning. Chance can't write DNA. Not encoding into the DNA cells or into the cells necessary for life to begin or to even be sustained. And like I said, if you've ever tried to write code, you'll understand just how difficult that can be. There's this additional problem for scientists who advocate the primordial soup theory. Life would begin in a mixture of nitrogen because amino acids are nitrogen-based. No substantive nitrogen deposits have ever been found in the layers of Earth where life supposedly began. Not to the point for the amounts necessary for what they say happened over a period of time. Since it's believed that amino acids were developing over a period of millions of years for this to happen, because the process took something like 100 million years from amino acid to the first cell, this nitrogen would have had to have been existing on Earth during that time. And they've never found any substantive deposits on Earth to equal that or to substantiate that. There was also a problem with what is described as cross-reaction. When experiments were conducted to recreate life in the laboratory using what they believed to be the conditions on Earth at the time, which I spoke about in my last sermon called Miller's Experiment, which they still use in schools today, which has been totally discredited, but they still use it, also in colleges, because it advocates evolution. Miller's experiment is based upon a hydrogen-rich mixture of methane, ammonia, and water vapor based on as the atmosphere. Problem is, the best hypothesis today that the atmosphere consists of very little hydrogen because it would have escaped into space. Kind of like when you fill up your balloon at parties and stuff and let them go. Where do they go? Straight up. They think it consisted of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water vapor. So after tinkering with the conditions and recipes, they eventually able to create only a couple of the basic amino acids out of 22 needed for life to exist. But the amino acids combined with other chemicals almost immediately resulted in a brown sludge. Because what they did when they created them, all the other little chemical deposits within the glass jar or whatever got absorbed into the amino acids and diluted it. So they had what they call a cross reaction. This cross reaction would have had a big factor in the first cells, because they would have reacted with any other chemicals that were around them at the time. The question is, where did the coding come from? Was it random chance? Can random events enable complex life to come into being? This question we have to ask as Christians. Oh, I would think it'd be the question we'd have to ask as human beings, but let's just stick to Christians for the time being. Well, a lot of scientists are also running into this today, and they're having to face the same questions. Now, DNA being able to code itself is kind of like, he puts it this way, he describes it as taking a Scrabble board and throwing the letters on the floor and producing a readable book. Meyer says even the simple protein molecule, or the genes to build that molecule, is so rich in information that the entire time since the Big Bang would not give you, as my colleague Bill Dembski likes to say, the probabilistic resources you would need to generate that molecule by chance. In other words, it just couldn't happen. Random chance of life beginning on its own is with 10 followed with 125 zeros. 10 to the 125th power. That's a number just so astronomical, it's unfathomable for the human mind to even comprehend. And that would have been for only one protein molecule. The simplest cell would need between 300 and 400 proteins to exist. This would all have occurred over 100 million years, as I said. And actually, that's a really short time in history if you believe that sort of thing, if you believe in evolution that began 4 or 5 billion years ago. And you can get into natural selection, which proposes that the strongest will succeed, thus taking large leaps in evolutionary chain. Is like a lot of them, they fall back to that because they can't make this other stuff work. You just got one problem with natural selection. You have to have the stuff already here for natural selection to work. You have to have cells, amino acid, protein, DNA. Natural selection doesn't count for the beginning of things. It only counts for what happens to them. It supposes and it just, its findings fitting different theories and conjectures, basically. So programming isn't done by natural selection, it isn't done by chance, evolution, or any other system invented by man. It's just simply too complex. The sequencing of DNA isn't done by a chemical process. We can't predict through what is called self-order what DNA will become. Self-order is the theory stating that DNA self-assembles itself into predictable function. In other words, you take a lot of DNA out there and you put it in a petri dish. If you take human DNA, it's going to turn into human. If you take a dog DNA, it's going to turn into a dog, sort of thing like that. That's self-order. And it's kind of like they said, well, evolution of the DNA was self-order. It's kind of like, let me give you an example of what self-order is. When you flush a toilet, the water organizes itself into a vortex and goes down the drain. That's self-order. But we see self-order in nature all the time. But the problem you got is DNA appears to be programmed because it does what it's supposed to do. It does certain things when it's supposed to do it, how it's supposed to do it, where it's supposed to do it, when it's supposed to do it. And it cannot manufacture information on its own. If that's the case, then we'd have new life popping up all over the place. Doesn't happen. You don't find those things. We don't find things popping up here and popping up there. Now they find new species every so often. But they didn't just appear, they've been here. Or they crossbred with something else and became a new species. But DNA just didn't program itself and become this other thing. It just didn't happen. It doesn't happen in nature. Myers points out that forces in nature can produce order at a point, but they simply cannot manufacture information on their own. Can't do it. Now we're trying to manipulate DNA to get rid of cancers and different things like that. Genetics are trying to make that happen. But they're using material that already exists and program that already exists. They're just monkeying with it, so to speak, if I can use a Darwinism conclusion. No hypothesis as to date has come close to explaining how information necessary to life's origin arose by naturalistic means. They don't know. They just guess. They sit around thinking, well, maybe it could have been this, maybe it could have been that. And for many researchers today, their only opinion continues to believe that somehow the missing magical formula is out there somewhere, and if they study hard and look long enough, they're going to find it. And that it'll have all the properties necessary to create the nucleic acid for life itself, for life to self-create. So they're faced with the following evidence today, wherever it may lead them, or give into the following cult-like belief that somehow life began all at once and all the DNA coding evolved somewhat by some miracle on the very first cell, and that cell divided into other cells that created its own DNA program that created this and created that and everything else. If it was that simple, you think they could have cured cancer by now?
They have.
Yeah, I think
They
so
would
too.
be rich.
Mm-hmm. Many just simply can't bring themselves to admit that there's intelligent design behind the complex cell in DNA. Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God, nor give thanks to him, but they became futile in their own speculation, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools." You ever heard of the Cambrian period in the fossil records? Cambrian period? That's interesting when you start reading about it. I never delved into it too much until I got into this book. This is a period that is believed to have begun about 530 million years ago. Now, I know if you get into that kind of thing. Prior to this period, life was a simple form in one-cell bacteria, blue-green algae, sponges, worms, things like that they find in fossil records. After the Cambrian, when they call it the Cambrian Big Bang occurred, according to the fossil records, 35 of the highest categories of life in the animal kingdom sprang forth within unique body forms. Out of nowhere, all the known animal life in the kingdom, the basis of all known animal life in the kingdom is believed to begin within a 5 million year period. To put it in perspective, according to Myers, if you were to compress all the Earth's history within a 24-hour period, that would account for about 1 minute. Genesis 1:21. So God created great creatures, sea creatures, and everything that lives and moves, and which the waters abounded according to their kind, every winged bird according to its kind, and God saw it was good. You got to believe one of the two. You truly do. Where did all that DNA sequence just pop up all of a sudden? Where could it have come from that could account for all this in the fossil records all of a sudden appear other than God himself? If you want to go down that road. Well, DNA provides some information needed to build an organism with a different form, but there's a whole lot more actually needed. You have to have the DNA building different proteins, but they have to have programmed structure themselves, and then they have to be told to assemble into larger structures and into different cells, and those cells have to be arranged into different tissues, and those tissues have to become organs serving different functions, and then life forms, and then the overall body has to be arranged by all of this for life itself to exist. So it's not just the organizing or the development of a cell or a protein or something like that. It has to become you. And we all look alike in most fashions. We all have 2 arms, 2 eyes, 1 nose, 2 ears, 2 legs. We're either male or female, depending on our chromosomes. But the DNA told all this thing to make all this into you. How did it do that? Well, evolutionists, they have this bottom-up evolutionary process, but the Cambrian period, it showed something different. It was a top-down process. Needless to say, this is a very vexing problem for Darwinists and evolutionists. They don't know how to explain that one. And not to mention the little problem that brought up many times, there's no intermediaries to speak of. They just all come on at one time. There's nothing in between. So Myers makes this comment. He says, the attempt to explain the origin of life slowly from chemical constituent is effectually dead now. In other words, the primordial soup is ruined. It ain't any good. The effective data required for life simply requires intelligent design. That's it. You can't get there any other way. I can't make a computer work without coding. And coding has to come from somewhere. It has to come from somebody other than myself. And life isn't a disorganized group of DNA and cells seeking to make a form. Disorganization, chaos, doesn't create form. Because DNA is a complex DNA to proteins, to cells, and what that can generate information, but it also has to generate intelligence and be from intelligence. So once more, fine-tuning reveals to us that we're created beings, not something that happened by an unbelievable randomness and fairy tales. God made us for a purpose, and our DNA makeup is part of that creation, as it says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Take a drink of water, let you get there. It said, then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish and sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over the creeping things that creep on earth. So God created man in his own image, in the image of God. That's where the programming came from, right there. There's our programming. God took an image of himself and he programmed it into the cells, into the DNA, into the proteins, and he says, this is going to be man, our likeness. He created him male and female. He created them, and then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth. He gave us the greatest DNA of all. A snapshot of His. We've talked about this at different times. It says those things on earth are a shadow of things in heaven. It tells us that in Hebrews. I think in Colossians also. It says those things are a shadow of things in heaven. We are a shadow of things in heaven. Our very makeup, our very DNA, our very complexity is a shadow of things in heaven. He made us from the elements of the world into the very image of God. He programmed our DNA to make us human, to give us thought and purpose and role, and that researchers and scientists can't even begin to explain. They can't believe in a creator because they believe in God, the chance, the God. But chance doesn't count for our fine-tuning in our bodies and our universe. And chance is all assuming and speculation. That's all it is. You can't get something from nothing. You can't get life from nothing. It's just not possible. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work today. It didn't work 530 billion or 4 billion years ago, whenever it was supposed to happen. Like I said, if you did, you'd have life springing up all over the place. J.P. Moreland, Ph.D., says this: if you apply a physical process to a physical matter, you're going to get a different arrangement of physical materials. You can't get a different physical reaction when you do things like boil and water. You get what you always get. You get steam. That's the process. But what you don't get in boiling a pot of water is intelligence. Especially if you touch the handle when it's cherry red. Well, yeah, you get a little bit of intelligence, I should say. I just threw that in. Well, let's consider the brain for just a moment. Weighs 3 pounds. It has 10,000 million nerve cells, each sending out enough fibers to create 1,000 million connections. Wow. That's equal to the number of leaves in a dense forest covering 1 million square miles. Our synapses can amazingly fire 10 billion times a second. And I walk around and wonder why I stumbled. You know, I mean, come on. It's the DNA, the programming, that makes us human. What is it in that 3 pounds and all those connections that makes us uniquely human? What's there? What is it? What is there that makes us a special biology? Yeah, it's the DNA. It's the DNA, the programming of God. But we're much more than just proteins and cells and DNA. We are unique spiritually. Because we're told that, for one thing. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 13 through 16. He says, 1 John chapter 4, 13. He says, we know that we live in Him and He in us because He has given us His Spirit. And we have seen and testified that the Father has sent His Son to be the Savior of the world. And if anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God, God lives in Him and He is in God, and so we know and rely on God, the love God has for us. Now, if simple evolution can somehow explain how the structure of life came to be on its own, then why wouldn't evolution give us robots? with a consciousness. Stop and think about it. This has been advocated by a man named Ray Kurzweil. And he says by the year 2019, a $1,000 computer will match the processing power of the human brain. And he says by 2050, a $1,000 computer will match the processing power of all human brains on Earth. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what he says. I know that I'm back to my programs again. The series Star Trek, there's an android on there called Data. And he strives to become human. He wants to know how to become human. How does he become human? What makes us human? What makes us unique? And he goes through this, and it's consistent throughout the program. Well, is this a real possibility within a few short years in our short future? Can androids become sentient beings with a conscience? And now there's many scientists that are skeptical, as am I. And it's a novel idea. It makes great science fiction series, but it takes on more of the processing power to become human. Intelligence doesn't create a consciousness. My dog's intelligent. There's dogs that do amazing tricks, amazing things. They're intelligent. Horses are intelligent. They say porpoises have as much brain function as a human being does, and are as intelligent as we are. But they don't have consciousness. Not in the way that we know it. Some say it takes a soul. But we know what they're actually saying in reality. It takes God. We're told in Scripture that we're more than just physical human beings in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23. It says, "The very God of peace sanctify you wholly, and I pray God your whole spirit and soul and body be preserved blameless unto the coming of our eternal Jesus Christ." We're told in Scripture that they're distinct from one another. They separate the body, the soul, the mind. Matthew 10:28 says, "And fear not them which can kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. But rather fear him which is able to destroy both the soul and the body in hell." A man considered the father of neurosurgery, Wilbur Penfield, wanted to prove that there was such a distinction. So he would simulate an electrically the proper motor cortex of a conscious patient. In other words, he'd take a probe and stick it in a certain place in your brain to make you do a certain thing. And what the challenge was, is they would keep one hand from moving when the current was applied, right or left. One couldn't move. Well, the patients, when this was done, would seize the hand with their other hand, nearly every time, in order to keep it from moving. Well, his theory on that is one hand is under control of the electrical current, the other is under the control of the patient's mind. One is automated, the other one is consciousness. He felt it was an example of the body and spirit in separate actions. I don't know, you can come to your own conclusion on that. But, you have to stop and think about this for a second. When we stop and think about the human consciousness. Many people have died for short periods of time. But those who have been revived retain their human consciousness, who don't have brain problems. Now, think about that for a second. Just for a second. If you were legally declared brain dead, then a few minutes later you're alive again, why didn't you lose all that you were? If you were a computer and that happened, you would have had to been reprogrammed from the very beginning. People who are associated with the study of brain have an adequate theory, don't have adequate theories of how the brain causes consciousness. They don't know. They don't have a clue. Once again, science comes up short. Scriptures tells us in 2 Corinthians 5:16, he says, therefore, from now on we regard no one according to the flesh, even though we have known Christ according to the flesh. Yet now we know him no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation, and old things have passed away, and behold, all things become new. We become new creatures. We're distinct creatures from all the other creatures of the world and all the other creatures of the universe. But taking on the Spirit of God, taking on the Spirit of Christ in combination with the Spirit of man makes us even a newer creature, even a different creature, even more inside, not in our minds, but shouldn't be, but a more superior creature. So what is the human conscience? Why is it so important to our understanding? How does it relate to fine-tuning by God? What is consciousness? Again, a description by J.P. Moreland, Ph.D. Consciousness consists of sensation, thought, emotion, desires, free choice that make us alive and make us aware. The big question for us is there an immortal soul that is within man, that dwells in man, that gives him consciousness? Are we born with it, or is it given to us by God? The short answer is that there is a spirit in man, but there is no scripture in the Bible saying there is an immortal soul. One that you're born with, one that you automatically go to heaven when you die, like the world believes. In fact, you may find this verse interesting, Ezekiel 18:20. The soul that sins shall die. So there's an immortal soul. How can a soul die? How can a soul die if it's immortal? So God fine-tuned man's intelligence, his consciousness, his body into a pattern to fit his own, so that we can fit into his family. And that's unlike any species on this planet, because we are beings that are going to be in his family. We will have God's DNA. We will have God's, you can call it spiritual if you want, proteins, makeup. I don't know how that works. Don't ask me afterwards. I don't know how real DNA in our bodies today works, actually. So God fine-tuned man's intelligence, his conscience in his body. The fine-tuning tells our conscious minds that we are unique, we're special creatures on a special world, in a special galaxy, in a special solar system, in a special universe created by God, or by Christ. Hebrews 1:1 says, long ago, many times, in many ways, God spoke our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days He has spoken to us by His Son, whom appointed the heir of all things, whom also created the world. To believe in Darwinism means you have to believe in nothing produces everything, non-life produces life, randomness produces fine-tuning, chaos produces information, unconsciousness produces consciousness, non-reason produces reason. Now this requires a huge leap of faith basing your beliefs on Darwinist theories. Deuteronomy 4:35, he says, to you it is shown that you might know that the Eternal Himself is God, and there is no other besides Him. To you, you're given this knowledge. You're shown this knowledge. You understand this. You're not walking around thinking that you come from a mud puddle. This might seem like a simplification of the process, but what I just gave you came from over 100 pages of information on this book. So I couldn't even get into the intricacies. I just hit the highlights. He says, Psalms 139:13, he says, for you were formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works. that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lower parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me, and when as yet there were none of them. Psalms 139. Our Creator said He made us. Our Creator said He programmed us and put within us a spirit that was capable of understanding, of consciousness. And we can see that the world around us has been fine-tuned for us to exist in a relative safety, while God worked out His plan to reproduce mankind. And He left nothing to chance.